everyone. Welcome to ICER, and this is our Community Engaged Storyteller series. I'm Christine Schreier. I'm the director of ICER, and my pronouns are she, her. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the unceded ancestral territory of the UBC Okanagan Nation, and for ICER that is important because so many of the partnerships we have with community members as well as institutions are from the Syilx Nation. So thank you all for coming today. We are using a few different pieces of technology in the room. Pardon me. So we are using this OWL camera on Zoom for the first time. So please let us know if there's any challenges for those online, if you can see and hear us. And I also want to thank the Department of Community Culture and Global Studies for their funding for this event. For those in person, we have food after as well.
Am I getting paid?
I don't know. Are you? And if anyone in the room, we also are recording for a video. So if you don't want to be, oh, there you go. If you don't want to be on camera, please let Kaylee know at the back. She's manning our cameras. Okay, there are housekeeping notes. The door is just over there. Washrooms are down the hall to the right. If you are online, you can turn on the captions if you can't hear us very well. And I think that is everything. So without any further ado, please let me introduce our storyteller today. This is Dr. Rachelle Hole, a professor in UBC Okanagan School of Social Work, co-director of the UBC Canadian Institute for Inclusion and Citizenship, which we love sharing space with and having next door. Rachelle is a Tier 1 UBC Okanagan Principal's Research Chair in Critical Disability Studies. She is passionate about community-engaged research, particularly research informed by the principles of disability justice. Rachelle is also a member of our steering committee and a cluster lead here at ICER, so we are so delighted to have her here today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'm going to turn a little bit so it can face you. So this is our storyteller series where we like to hear how did people get interested in research, but community engaged research in particular. So I'm wondering if you could tell us, because community engaged research means different things to different people, could you share a personal anecdote that encapsulates community engaged research for you?
Sure. So these are really hard questions. I got them ahead of time and I was like, holy cow, where do I begin? But I'm going to start kind of at a high level with this one, because when I think about community engaged research on my program of research, it's really kind of permeated all that I do. And a lot of that started in 2007 when people in the community living sector, so the sector that supports people who are neurodiverse, who have intellectual and developmental disabilities, they identified a need for research to inform policy and practice in British Columbia and Canada. And I was fortunate enough, my colleague Tim Staton, who just retired from Vancouver, who is co-director of the CIIC with me, family members, self-advocates, policymakers, nonprofit executive directors, they approached him and said, we really think that a university research center is what we need to offer credibility to push government to really promote policy and practice that promotes inclusion. And so from the very beginning of the Institute, when we were a center, it really had its roots in community. And so as I kind of look back over kind of the trajectory of my career, and I think about the many different projects, there's really been this alignment with the community and with the sector. So our advisory board is made up of family members, of nonprofit, of government, of self-advocates, importantly of self-advocates themselves. And they often give us direction around projects that we should engage in or priorities. Or we can check with them and say, well, is this really aligning with where you see the sector should be going? Is this going to be useful? So I think what that speaks to me about in terms of community engaged research is, I think when we engage at multiple levels, right? So the people most affected by policy and practice, the self-advocates who are at the center of the work, do they have input? Do they have voice? Policymakers who are at a different level of being able to implement knowledge mobilization, of family members who are impacted by policy and practice every day in their daily lives. I think having that diversity of perspectives really helps to enhance knowledge mobilization and knowledge translation, which to me is really exciting because it means that the findings, that what we're doing is going to actually have an impact, like it'll be taken up. So that's really important to me, because unless the community's kind of driving, and not that it always does, right? Like different projects have different levels of engagement or different types of engagement, and I think that's okay too. So if I think of, as an example, Leighton Schnellert, my colleague who's now the co-director of the Institute with me, we started a theater project many years ago. And it happened because the CEO of a community living organization said, hey, you know, we're really struggling with how to support self-advocates' rights to be in relationships. What does the literature say? And so we were having a brainstorm about, you know, well, this is an issue of relevance to this organization. And I was like, why don't we do a theater project? I know nothing about theater, but I knew someone who did.
That's always key, knowing someone who knows someone who did. Yeah.
And so we started this journey, and it's kind of interesting to reflect on how that whole project has evolved over time, because the first project started because a CEO said, this is important to us as providers, as support workers. We came up with the title Sex, Lies, and Citizenship, which dates many of us probably. And then we started working with self-advocates, and some of them quit because they didn't want to do a project on sex. And then some of them were like, we need to change this title. And so that was kind of the first theater project. But the second theater project that we did, it originated with the self-advocates. So we started with them at the center, and they told us, we want to talk about our rights to inclusive and competitive employment. So the second one was called We Deserve to Work. They identified what the topic was. They conducted the research that informed the production itself. This was during COVID, so I wasn't really involved. Leighton was really leading that. But then as that's evolved, we're now engaging in a third project with the self-advocates at the center. So now they've decided that they want to do a project on inclusive housing. Of course, we need to find money to do it. Right. But when you look at, it's really interesting because when you look at that topic, inclusive housing, many of our partners, like Community Living BC, that's one of their top priorities. Because of the housing crisis, people with disability who live on disability benefits can't afford to live independently in community. And so if we're really about inclusion, you know, how do we think about accessible, inclusive housing that's supportive and that can accommodate people's needs and provide the proper supports? So it's really neat to kind of see at different levels, starting with the self-advocates' priorities, but then seeing how it maps onto across the sector, other groups, and an alignment with the priorities of the sector.
Yeah, thank you. I love these sessions because I get to hear about new projects, but also be reminded of the old ones too. When I was directing ICER as interim director in 2019-2020, we had Leighton and Rachelle come talk about the theater project. And it was one of our knowledge mobilization workshops, and we went out to a theater, and it was so fun to learn about those projects, and now there's been more since. I've also taught the CESI theme course a few times, and in that course we always talk about what is community. It's one of the first things we do, and you've captured it so nicely that it's not homogeneous. There's always these different layers. So thank you for that piece of it.
Thanks.
Yeah. So this one is a harder question. If I had to answer this, I think I would struggle as well. So reflecting on your journey, what pivotal moments in your early life sparked your passion for research?
This is actually an easy one.
Is it?
And it's going to shock you because I don't even know, well, I know how I got there. So the very first research project I was ever involved with was looking at the oral health of aging adults in long-term care.
Wow, okay. Yeah. I can see the links. That makes sense.
So when I was doing my Bachelor of Social Work at UBC Vancouver, the director asked me, hey, do you want to do a research project with me? And she was partnering with a professor in dentistry. And so I started on this journey of being a research assistant and ended up working with Dr. Michael McEntee and for probably 6 years, into my master's thesis work. So yeah, I did a lot of research around oral health and aging.
Wow.
To start.
Yeah. And that continued. That was your master's research as well?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, none of my research was about teeth.
Okay. But it led you on the path there. Oh,
yeah.
Very
so
interesting.
it sparked my passion for research. And so I've always been interested in disability and disability justice, although that's kind of a new term, disability justice.
Yes.
But that kind of was my first exposure to
what is research.
What is research?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what got me into disability studies is really I worked in the deaf community for over 20 years. And so that journey really taught me a lot about, well, it taught me that I was a hearing person, and I never had known that before. And it taught me about, about privilege in a real profound way of not recognizing how you're positioned until people tell you that you're hearing and you don't know that you're hearing.
Finding those new identities for yourself in research. Interesting. Was the one you mentioned, your first entry into research, was that a community engaged project or not yet? That was, no. Okay. Just checking. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. So looking back from where you started, which you've already talked about a little bit, to where you are now, could you share a story about defining moment in your research journey that taught you something invaluable? Describing the moment, who was there, what was the project, all the little details for us.
Sure. This one kind of makes me smile, and Emily, you're going to enjoy this one. So a number of years ago, we embarked, and again, this was because this is a priority of the sector. I got a partnership grant with a large group of partners. I think there are about 8 different organizations who partnered with us. And Emily was our early project coordinator. That's why I'm was referring to Emily here. And so we started out, we wanted to develop, we wanted to change the employment outcomes for people who live with a label of intellectual disability, because only 1 in 5 individuals that live with a label of intellectual disability have any kind of paid employment. And when they do work, it's usually a few hours a week for minimum wage. And I have to add that males often get hired more and work more frequently and get paid more than females. So talk a little gender inequities. So we set out to try and create an online program for transitioning youth based on the predictors of what would increase the employment outcomes of transitioning youth. So we had great ideas, and we had self-advocates involved as paid advisors, and we hired people that were really good at programming, because we wanted to make it this online kind of gaming, interactive program that the youth could engage in. And so we wanted it to kind of be user-driven, a user-driven design process. And so we engaged with self-advocates. We asked them, if we were going to do a theme for this platform that we could talk about the learning about employment and pathways to employment, what should our theme be? And, sci-fi, fantasy, what should we do? And so between those consultations, the space theme, that was like everybody, came to a consensus that a space theme was great. So we designed TIDE, the Transitioning Youth with Disabilities and Employment platform. And then we started piloting it with our first cohort, and they all hated it. They hated it. They despised it. They said that they felt it, they didn't use this word, but they felt infantilized by it. And so after maybe 6 months of heartbreak, and this is still pre-COVID too, but what do we do? We've put, and I guess the frustrations were, we'd put all this money into it and it felt like a real failure.
Yeah.
But we started all over, and we launched TIDE 2.0, and we took what we learned from that, right? And I think what we learned is obviously people in that community who are youth are very diverse. And if you go with one group's kind of consensus about something, that doesn't mean it's going to be applicable to everybody. So that was one learning.
That is a very good learning opportunity.
Recognizing the diversity of community, that community is not homogenous,
right,
and we can make mistakes if we make that assumption.
Yeah.
The second piece was, sometimes what you think is a failure, because community engaged research is hard to do. Those can be really great learning opportunities that can inform how to make things better.
Yeah.
And so I was just sharing that we're launching our final research cohort, and we've had the best uptake like this fall of people who are so excited about engaging and having this resource for youth that are in high school, that are transitioning out. So it's kind of like we're really rejuvenated and like, oh, this is exciting. And so we're going to now launch that to be publicly available for free to any organization who supports transitioning youth to use.
So cool.
Yeah.
So what is the theme now? Is it still a game, or is it a completely different online platform?
Yeah, so it's still like an online, it's got interactive pop-up, H5P. I've learned these little...
I don't know what that means.
It's little things that pop up when you watch a video. It's like multiple choice things that keep you engaged, so you're not just passively sitting there.
Right.
So we've made ways to make it still interactive, but it doesn't have a theme.
Okay, just general. Yeah. Oh, so
and we did do some consulting with self-advocates with some youth, and we got feedback like there needed to be more pink in the animated video, and someone has to wear a black leather jacket, but I'm not sure the leather jacket got in there.
Oh, shucks. That would have been a good... Next time. So that also shows to that iterative process that you were talking about. And so going back and having to change things and having that cycle. And I think it can be really hard for especially graduate students. And I know there are some in the room because that time to have you feel like you have to have results right away. And so not always realizing that failure is a part of this kind of opportunity. So thank you for bringing that up, because I know I've had students who I've been supervising think, well, what if I don't get any results? That in itself is a result. So thank you. Yeah, for sharing that.
I refer to it as the space failure, but
yes. All right. So I think that covers lessons. I know that you've had many different experiences. Is there any other stories about invaluable learning opportunities from other projects or things you want to share?
One that's been a small one, but it's been really impactful to me is an individual who's a mom who lives with the label of intellectual disability, Rachelle. She's passionate about the fact that there are lots of parents with intellectual disabilities that don't have the supports they need to raise their children in their own homes. And so she's really passionate about the lack of services, lack of supports for parents with disabilities. She's very concerned about the over-surveillance, the fact that children get removed more than the parents are supported to parent successfully. So she approached the Institute and said, I'd really like to partner to do some work around how can we learn from parents with disabilities about what their experiences have been, but how we can better support parents to be good and successful parents with their children. So we've been doing these focus groups, and we did a literature review, and we intentionally from the very beginning included Rachelle as the lead researcher on it. So we had a research assistant that worked with Rachelle to do the Tri-Council Policy Ethics certification so that they could co-facilitate all the focus groups together. Rachelle's been involved in some of the data analysis.
Fun. Yes.
She is a co-author on one paper that's in review right now with the British Journal on Learning Disabilities, and contributed the plain language summary as well as some methods sections, as well as reviewing the findings and stuff with us. And now we're doing a paper on the focus group findings with parents with disabilities throughout the province of BC. So that's just been a really cool one, because it I think is an example of how do we be inclusive, and how do we really acknowledge the contributions of a partner when historically they've been excluded from having the power in driving the research itself.
Yeah.
So that's been a really fun.
That was really cool. What a I know nothing about that project, so I thank you for sharing it. That sounds really interesting. Has Michelle gotten to present at conferences with you as well? How did that?
Yeah.
How was that experience?
So Michelle and the MSW student, Lizzie Walsh, they presented at the Health and Developmental Disabilities Conference last fall.
Oh, fun.
And Michelle just sent me their call for abstracts this week saying, are we going to do another one?
That's great.
So that's a pretty fun project.
So on a related note about tips for co-authoring with community members. So it sounds like this has been a good partnership. Do you have any tips you would give for others who might want to co-author with community members?
Well, I think it's a priority of community engaged research to acknowledge. I think it's also part of a commitment to disability justice. So Laura and I were just talking about citation justice, and I know Robin's really passionate about this as well, and the idea of kind of who gets excluded. So both the citational practices of who are we including, but also in doing that, who are we including as co-authors, and recognizing the variety of ways people contribute. And I know some journals now make you specify exactly who did what with a manuscript. But I think they're really great ways to think about how we can do that creatively. So like Michelle, I mean, perfect for in that journal, there's an abstract and then a plain language abstract. And who better as an expert in plain language to write that, and then thinking about other pieces and how Michelle's been involved, but how Michelle could wanted to and could collaborate in that writing process.
Yeah, so interesting. Thanks. So this is on a similar note, I guess. So all of these questions are so related, but you're hitting all the things I want to talk about. So every research project leaves a mark on both you as a researcher, I think you've shared, but also on community. So could you recount a story where the research project has impacted the community involved with those outcomes? So I know that so much of your work is impacting community, but is there one in particular that you think has had the biggest impact on policy or on the community's practices or anything like that?
Just because it's fun, although Leighton's not here to just talk about it with me. The theater project has been completely it impacted me, but I think so. Romance, Relationships, and Rights, the first project, the first theater production, was attended by close to 1,000 audience members.
Wow.
Yeah. And, just hearing the reactions from people who attended. So there were support workers who attended who were like, I never thought that the people I supported wanted to be in relationships. Or a parent whose daughter was one of the actors said, I never thought my daughter would ever be able to be on stage and participate in a production like that.
Right.
To see the transformation of the actors over the two projects themselves. We traveled I'm not the theater person. Leighton and his team.
You are now a theater person. You keep saying that, but you're like a secret theater person now.
Yeah. But Leighton and the team traveled that production. And so we presented at the BC Case conference last spring, the We Deserve to Work, which is the organization that brings all of the inclusive education leaders throughout the province together. I forget what the acronym stands for now. But and we also, it was the closing keynote at the World Congress for Supported Employment in Vancouver in last June. And it was so powerful to see. There were over 600 people at the conference from I forget how many countries, and just to see the self-advocates who co-created that production. So they came up, they researched it, they came up with the scenes, they acted it, and presented it, and just the power of that was really profound. So when I think of the trajectory of where that started with a CEO saying, how do we best support the people in our organization to be able to pursue relationships and have the sexual citizenship or agency around romance and relationships, to where it is now. And, you know, we weren't sure about the third production, but like we get emails by
People constantly asking
from one of the actors, we need to get back together.
Have you named this as a theater company yet? Is that something because the actors keep changing, or like it's not really?
They've been pretty consistent.
Yeah.
Say it once, but we haven't really.
I think you need a name. They're now a thing in the world. Yeah. From the conference, because it was global, do you know of anyone else who's now said that was such a great idea? We're going to do it in our community and somewhere else? And
I haven't heard of that. Yeah.
Very interesting to know. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you. I love the theater project. I want to come to some of the shows. So on the connection there to advocacy, so that has led to advocacy from the self-advocates themselves and from the support workers in different ways, I'm assuming. Yeah. So the question is, how have your projects led to advocacy with the community, for the community? Have you become an advocate in a different way? Yeah.
I guess for me personally, I think it's a big part of why I do the research that I do. We're doing a project right now around community engagement for the Ministry of Children and Family Development for their new children and youth with support needs. And Laura and I are working on, and Enya are working on that project together, and with the Family Support Institute. And we said early, because if we're going to go and engage with families who have children and youth with support needs, we know that the system is failing those families. And there's a lot of anger, and there's been a lot of engagement, but not engagement.
Right.
And so we said early that how it works into my research, it's like we want families to know that we can't promise them that MCFD is going to do anything.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're paying for us to do this engagement, and we're doing it. But how do we be so?
Yeah. How will it impact? Yeah.
So we'll give them our report, but then as partners, the Family Support Institute and the Institute and those of us who are involved, we've said, well, regardless of what they do, we're going to do these things as knowledge translation pieces. Right. We are going to do infographics. We're going to do animated videos of our findings. Amazing. We're going to do webinars, and we're going to take it back and invite people that spoke to us to, tell us what they think, and, put the pressure on that way.
By having more things out there that they can refer to, and
making it public, and making sure that people can speak to.
That's cool.
They found this, and you need to be accountable to that. However that looks.
That sounds so interesting. All the different ways you've used the words knowledge translation and knowledge mobilization, which is great. But making sure that that's out there in the world for others to use as advocacy. Yeah. It just made me think of something else, and I've lost my train of thought on it.
It's just one other thing, so it's interesting because when you work with the government and have a contract with them, they sometimes basically say you can't make what you find public.
Right.
But we've got really good lawyers at UBC that if you do have those contracts, and this is part of that community engagement with government, is to really push to keep our rights to make that information public, because it's a really important part of what we do as, I think, academic researchers, is to make sure that what we're finding in the results can be made available to the public, because we're publicly funded.
That's an excellent point. Yeah.
So being aware of when you do partner, what are the implications of that, and
the limitations, and how you can push the boundaries all the time, right? On those kinds of things. I was going to say, it makes me feel better when I talk to you, because you have so many projects on the go at once, as do I, because we have these long-term relationships that develop, and then you keep going back to those people, and they keep coming to you. And so I always feel like I multitask too much, but then I talk to other community engaged researchers, and I think, no, this is normal for us. Though I would like to make a few less, end a few things. So thanks for sharing all those. My last question, and then we'll turn it over to the audience to ask questions as well. With the wisdom of hindsight, what advice would you impart to the new wave of community engaged researchers? Many of whom are in the room right now.
These are hard questions.
Tips for futures.
I think trying our best to be authentic in relationships.
Yeah.
Because people know when you're not being authentic, I think.
Yeah, I would agree.
And I don't think you can really I don't think you have meaningful partnerships unless you're committed to that, you know. And, you know, I've been privileged thinking about some of the research I've done with Indigenous communities or Indigenous researchers. You know, I think just learning about the idea of reciprocity, you know, because if we're asking of reciprocity in relationships, right? If we're asking of community partners to give of their time and energy, we need to be authentic in how we're engaging with them. And there needs to be a commitment to reciprocity in that.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
It makes me think, too, that sometimes if you're being your authentic self and the partnership isn't going well, move away from that partnership. Like, you don't have to stay there, right, if that's not working out for... Yeah.
And the other, I guess, just the last one is going back to kind of the space failure, right?
Yes.
It's like those mistakes or when things don't work are, in hindsight, even though they're really painful in the moment, in hindsight, there really is a lot of learning that comes out of it that's valuable. So.
Yeah. You also mentioned how sex, lies, and citizenship became romance,
relationships,
and rights. So that was the shift because you had named it one thing. Was it hard to let go of the title, or you were just no? Okay,
no.
Just checking. Just checking.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much those were my questions, but I would love to know if others, especially graduate students, but other researchers who have stories to tell, if you have any questions for Rachelle as well. Both online, we're monitoring the chat, so you can comment there or turn on your mic, or anyone in the room. Someone has to start. Yes, Agnieszka.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I have a question about advocacy on the campus. Because I wonder if you have an experience advocating for students on the campus or for students with disabilities. I would love to hear because I tried and I feel like, you know, there's specific like kind of model that it's permitted who can speak to disability, to the medical product. So either people with disability, which is really important, but or medical professions. And I felt like I wanted to advocate for my student, and I come from sociology. And I felt like my voice was completely dismissed, even though I had like observed the student, and I kind of like felt I knew the condition or like what kind of you know, made the potential accommodation needed, but I was completely dismissed. I wonder if you have many experience, like if you have experience advocating for the campus community.
Well, I'm on the UBC Accessibility Committee. So that's one, I think, again, you know, in talking about academic ableism, the academy is very ableist. I think we all can acknowledge that. And, you know, with the new legislation, hopefully that gives us a bit of teeth around how the university has to respond. I mean, there has been legislation around accommodations before the BC Accessible BC Act. That said, people fall through the cracks. So I advocate in my own classroom. I've been fortunate to co-teach with Robin Metcalf, who's a PhD candidate with me. And I think, for me, I think making access a priority in the classroom, it needs to be a commitment of individual instructors. But that doesn't mean that the institution should not be held accountable as well. So I think that there are just multiple layers. And, you know, I think it's really insidious. I was saying this to somebody the other day, but even in our faculty, you know, we have a EDI committee, and we had something come out that was talking about how we want to create safe spaces, and it was worded as such, and it was worded that we want to create safe spaces for Black, Indigenous, Black, people of color, LGBTQ plus individuals, as well as folks who identify, as well as folks with disability. And I was like, how come every other category is identity first? But when it comes to disability, it's person-centered. It's not as though it's an identity that people claim. And I'm like, someone who's able-bodied wrote that, because when you talk to disabled folks, they use identity first language. So it's always interesting to me when you think about what language is being used. So I need to write that email about, why are you using this language? Because language is power and language is a choice and it communicates certain things. And when we don't see disability as a positive identity category, or we don't want to say the word, we're actually reproducing disability as something other, and we're actually stigmatizing it, right? If we're not, why just say the word? So anyways, to answer, yes, I'm passionate about advocating for disability justice and disability rights. I think it has to happen in so many a myriad of ways to really shift what I see as, systemic ableism in the institution.
Yeah. Yes, Jada.
Well, further to that, I noticed you said living with the label of intellectual disability. Could you talk a bit more about that versus disabled? What would be preferred language or a better way to be an ally?
It's so complicated. I always get into the language debates.
I love the language debates. Please tell me more.
Yeah. So people in the community living sector use various language. The label of intellectual disability speaks specifically to a diagnostic criteria of a particular IQ or less. And so people who get labeled as an intellectual disability, that allows them to be eligible for supports and services, right? But for them, it's something that's associated with something that's very stigmatizing. And because of that, even the word disability is, I think, stigmatizing for people in the community living sector. So you'll hear words like diversability in the community living sector. But when you get outside of the community living sector, into more broadly disability justice and the many disability communities, you'll find disabled people saying, I'm disabled, or using identity first language. So it's a little bit different. It's a bit community specific in terms of the community living sector. So there's a group called the BC Self-Advocate Leadership Network who's put out 3 documents now around commitments to plain language and the type of language that they'd like to see their allies use. And so for me, when I'm talking about the community living sector, I tend to have a bit different. I use different language because I want to be sensitive to the context and to the self-advocates' values and what they are comfortable with. As someone who lives with lupus and a chronic illness, I use identity first language. And I think when we talk about different EDI initiatives, when we add disability as an add-on, we're doing a disservice.
Joanne.
There's a question from the chat.
Okay.
Vanessa, I'm wondering, Vanessa, can you unmute yourself and we'll see if we can hear you in the room, and if not, then I'll read your question.
Thank you for this amazing discussion, and what a wealth of knowledge and beautiful reflection. And my just additional note is it's great to listen to you talk, Rachelle, about your journey and all the projects you've participated on. I noted that you touched on your journey of the power and privilege that you hold. And I was curious, how have you supported up-and-coming researchers who want to engage with community to explore and unpack what power and privilege they may hold entering into the realm of community-based research in order to reduce the potential of harm?
Well, I've been very fortunate to have great graduate students. I've been very thankful. And I think that the privilege of being a mentor in those relationships is something I take seriously. I think it's through relationships, and I think it's about an openness to Robin's signing to me. I think it's about an openness to be available, to have hard conversations. But I think it's really in that relationality again. Like if you have a trusting relationship, you're able to have conversations about issues of power and privilege. And I think it's in trying to model my own reflexivity in that process too, perhaps.
I was going to say, from watching you next door, but also feeling like I'm mentored by you as well as a director previously. And I always used to say I want to be Rachelle Hull when I grow up. So because she was winning teaching awards and grants and things. And I hardly ever say that. Like, that is a huge compliment. But I think it is you being a model for other people just by the way that you are in the world. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So many hands now. I don't know who Laura, I think I saw yours first.
Can I just add on to that? So as a present and a past graduate student of yours, one of the ways that you have modeled that to me is by you've never said no to me. And that's like
you've shocked her.
So even when I've come to you with some pretty harebrained ideas, you've never said no to me, but you have given me additional information to consider. And so, so I never felt restricted. And I always felt like things were possible because of that. And so, as an Indigenous person coming into an institution, terrifying experience. And so, you were able to use your power and privilege in order to be able to see the possibilities and to help me understand how I can survive in this institution. And also being able to believe in me when I wasn't able to do those things. So that's been a really big piece. And so one of the reasons why you're struggling, I think, with this question is because of your humility. And so I just wanted to add that on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see Erin and then Pega, unless there's someone online. Are we good online? Okay, go ahead, Erin.
Yeah, hi. I came in a little late, so forgive me if you already kind of talked about this. My context is that myself and two of my children were recently, within the last year, diagnosed as autistic. So I'm both on the advocating for my children, mainly with the insane school system, and then dealing with myself as an autistic person. And I'm always very aware that so much of the research that I find from an academic standpoint is not coming from the perspective of autistic people. And of course, that's made even more complicated when we're dealing with people with intellectual differences and disabilities. And so I'm just wondering what your kind of field of work and experience has been in actually publishing things that are coming from these perspectives and paradigms, as opposed to working in conjunction with, and then the authorship still being from able-bodied individuals.
I think they're increasingly, we're finding more visibility of neurodiverse authors, which is exciting. There's a neurodiverse reading group that Robin's participated in that really highlights a lot of authors who identify as autistic or neurodiverse. In the disability justice sphere, there's a lot of advocates who identify as autistic who are doing incredible advocacy work. Most of mine has been with.
Yeah.
There's a young woman, I'm blanking on her name, Emma's sister wrote a book on her experiences as an autistic young adult.
I'll simmer with that. If I remember, I will.
Okay,
It's deep in the brain somewhere. But
Yeah, and so she wrote a book from her experience growing up in school and everyday life and in her family. And their family, there are 3 autistic kids, and she's the middle child. And it's a really beautiful book of her. And I think she wrote it when she was about 16 or 17. It was really a really good read about her experiences. But increasingly there's more.
Right.
Yeah. It's just finding those opportunities.
Yeah, it's this tough thing where I go in and have these IEP meetings with teachers, and I'll say things like, my child has been struggling with X, Y, and Z, and then their rebuttal is always, but look at all these places where they're thriving, as though the struggle can't be perceived by the person who's struggling. You know, there's this like external understanding of the disabled lived reality. So I'm just trying to find more resources that I can use when I'm in those environments, other than my own personal lived experience. And noticing that there's a substantial gap.
I'll just tell you a story about advocacy and academic ableism. I had a gentleman contact me a year and a half ago, wanted to do his PhD with me and identifies as autistic, and wanted to do his PhD work around autistic identities, and has a private practice as a therapist. Came to me with a Shirk doctoral fellowship and said, I really want to do this, but I can't. I need to do it online. Like, I can't be in person because of being autistic. And he was told he had to come and be in person in order to do his PhD. And we didn't get a chance to advocate because he just said, screw it, I'm not coming. But you know, it's really interesting when we talk about what are, you know, when we think about our responsibilities and our legal responsibility to accommodate. I'm sure we could have pushed back and said, well, we just went through COVID and people were online, no problem. Like, why can you not offer this accommodation to this individual who clearly wants to do this great and important work and make a contribution in an understudied area? Like, you know, but just being told no was enough to say, I don't want to advocate.
Yeah, I mean, because that's probably the 1,000th no.
Yeah. And, you know, I asked his permission and if I could use that story because, you know, I think it's a powerful story that, you know, we think about how do we accommodate when people get here. We're not even accommodating people to get here.
Exactly. Yes.
Right?
Pega, I saw your hand.
Thanks for sharing your experience. It was very interesting to learn from you. You know, one of the concepts that you bring up was about citation justice. It was very new for me, and I was wondering if this concept is about including the community that we are, you know, engaged with it for doing research. Is it about their role or their share in the production of knowledge, or what? Yeah, if you can clarify it would be very wonderful.
So I am so fortunate that my graduate students teach me a lot. So I'm learning from their expertise, particularly Robin and Laura do work in this area. And I think there's many ways to think of it. And if you both have anything you want to add, I think it's acknowledging people who often don't get cited. So, for example, Indigenous scholars prioritizing citing Indigenous scholars and Indigenous voices, and recognizing that historically, you know, those voices may have been excluded, about publishing with people who you partner with, so being inclusive around co-authorship, and how do we recognize the contributions that sometimes the traditional academic matrix standards don't acknowledge what that contribution is, but recognizing people contribute in many different ways, and how do we do that? So I think it's multi-layered. Being clear, like one of the things when we put our class on social work practice and diversity, we're not just citing a bunch of white people. Right? I mean, that seems simplistic or it seems obvious, but so often when you look at course syllabi, you know, where do students see themselves represented? The variety, you know, Robin was really great because when we put our course together, you know, podcasts, like the non-traditional places where knowledge is being communicated in ways that one might be more accessible for some students. It might be more interesting. They might actually listen to it while they're cooking instead of having to read something. But just thinking about who's being represented, in what we publish, in our course outlines, in who we're publishing with. I think those are all pieces of what I would call citation justice. But I'm learning. So.
Go ahead, Missy.
Okay, thank you very much for your for sharing your stories. I am a PhD candidate now. Before starting,
Congratulations.
Just before starting my, I'm doing my brev actually now, and I will be working with refugee communities with highly sensitive identity disclosure issue. So I have a lot of questions. First, how to, I'm not touching all the questions, but there are really, I had these big questions when I was, before coming, when I was on my way. That first, how would you, and because I see a lot of experts at Community Engaged Research in the room that I really love to have this discussion with, how should we really, if you're working with this issue of confidentiality of, the identity and disclosure of the identities, how should you reach out the community first? Because for me, it's not that I have a already built institutionalized community, but like rather people whom I know they want to share their stories. So my research would be like a connection and not to amplify those voices. So first, for me, using the already literature that I came across, I'm still struggling how to really struggle my approaching and my how to approach the community to keep everything as fair as possible, and especially talking about the later on in the research at the data dissemination part, how to really keep this fair and justice while I have a lot of sensitivity around their identity and my identity is not hidden. So it's like there are a lot of scenarios that I think and I come across, and so I don't know, I just wanted to really share this to hear if you and other colleagues here have advices and stories to share.
My initial thought would be to have that conversation with the people, with the community. Like, I think if that can be something that people agree upon and have some kind of protocol, have protocols in place that prioritize people's safety first, I think those are really important. And I don't think that sometimes we can just do that alone. I think it needs to be done in conversation and dialogue. And it might not even be a fixed protocol. It might be, like an idea of a living document, because if things are really sensitive, you're also going to have to respond in time, in the moment, to those issues of safety. And maybe the protocol is, how do we respond when we have to make a change even, right? But I think you anticipate the best you can and then be prepared to respond and do that with people to the best of our ability. I don't know if other people have. Mike? Christine?
I think going to community, it is hard when the community is scattered and it's not an organization you're working with, or there's not a known entity. So I think trying to find representatives that you are, like how you got to this community project to begin with, and asking their opinions is a really good one. But I can't see a clock, so I don't know how long we've been going. Joanne is indicating that we have come to the end of our time. So please join me in thanking Rachelle Hull for being our storyteller today. I've learned so much, and I hope you have as well. Thank you.